Welcome, everyone, to the Couple Nurses Podcast with your host, Matt, and myself, Peter. Another awesome episode today. But first, guys, remember, make sure you check out couplenurses.com. We keep all our show notes there. We have some cool blog posts. We also have wearefrontlinewarriors.com. Lots of amazing content there about mindfulness, wellness, meditation. Just trying to make you guys more conscious while we make ourselves more conscious. We also have the travel nursing checklist out and the NCLEX study guide for all you young nurses out there. And don't forget, check us out on YouTube. Give us a like, give us a comment. Make sure you guys give us a rating on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts and whichever platform you guys listen to. Until Matt.
What's up? I'm doing great today. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about the new FDA guideline changes that just took place in January 2020 and transitioned to 2021. And then also nurses getting their license revoked. Interesting topics. When it comes to nursing revocation, I never thought about it being possible, especially being on the other side of being in court. And it's so easy creating meta errors, to be honest. It's so, we're going to talk about the story later on in the episode of an easy mistake that any ICU could do by just overriding meds.
Mm-hmm. It's scary how the different types of ways you can lose your license. And it's one of those things I feel like you don't believe it happens until it happens to you. And if it does happen to you, it's too late. Like, I never got my license revoked, neither have you. And I personally don't know anybody that has gotten it done. But I remember the stories that we looked at, it does happen. And there's numbers to that. And it's not always a case that ends up being on the news. Sometimes it's like a low-key case and it just happens. So just be careful out there. Remember, it's your license and you're obligated to follow all the rules. If you don't feel safe practicing in a unit, you probably shouldn't be practicing there, or at least let the manager know that you feel uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, it's your license. No one's going to give up theirs just so you could save yours.
Yep, and the hospital's not going to care. They're just going to treat you like you're just another number, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So when it comes to these FDA changes, so in 2020, January 1st, it was mandatory for any manufacturing company that's making over 10 million to switch their labels. Any manufacturer that's under 10 million was supposed to change theirs by 2021 of January 1st. And any kind of product like honey, maple syrup, and sweeteners like that, they had till July 1st of 2021 to change their labels. So as of this recording, all the nutrition labels are different in America. So let's talk about them. What are the changes that were introduced?
Yeah, one thing I wish we would have looked over is like the progression and the development of the nutrition label over time, how it changed over the years. Because we just looked at basically these updated guidelines, but I'm really curious now on how the nutrition label was in like the early 2000s or the late 1900s.
So fun fact, when it comes to serving sizes, which we talk about, they weren't changed since 1993. So this is the first time in over 20 years that these guidelines have been changed to this now.
Yeah, that's wild. And same with like the serving sizes were always almost like hysterical to me, especially ones on the cereal, like the cereal boxes. We'll go over how they changed them on these new guidelines. But I remember a few years ago, like a serving size of cereal was like, what is like a quarter of a bowl? Like nobody ever ate one serving size of cereal in their life. Nobody.
Yeah, it's funny because a couple weeks ago I bought that, the fiber cereal. It's very small, and I poured myself stuff in the bowl. I'm like, you know what? Let me measure this out because I'm a little bit carb conscious today. And it was over 2 serving sizes, and I thought it was just like 1. So of course I did maybe like 1.5, but it's so impossible to get that 2/3 in a small little cup.
And it's so deceiving because you look at nutrition labels and you're like, okay, 1 serving is this. So you're automatically already think of yourself eating that 1 serving, but in reality, you're not eating that 1 serving. So it's very dishonest, you could say, especially like those cereals, especially on those drinks where it's like a 1, let's say 12-ounce bottle, but you have 1.5 servings in there. We talked about before the episode, where it's like, who drinks like 2/3 of like a 12-ounce bottle? Nobody. You drink the whole thing. And no one's accounting for those calories, and you think it's a good choice, but in reality, it might not be the best choice.
Yeah, and most of us are conscious about it, especially our listeners too. We talk about health so much, but for the general public, it's very, very deceiving, just like you mentioned. Yeah. So some new changes that are being done: larger, bolder serving sizes. The serving size when it comes to calories, and the calories are larger, and also usually when you look at the right side, it says calories from fat. So they remove that. The reason being is based on scientific research. They say that it's not evident to state, or it doesn't really matter how much calories are from fat. What really matters is the type of fat that we're consuming versus saturated or unsaturated.
And that makes complete sense. Like, you don't really have to know how much calories are coming from fat, because if you're counting calories, you're just worried about the whole number. And I was actually at a grocery store a couple months ago, and I was trying to figure out why certain products had the calories from fat and why certain ones didn't. So I was trying to like figure out, because the ones that didn't have it had more fat than the ones that had the actual label on it. But that makes sense, because you said that it takes time for these companies to roll out these new labels, and there's like due dates. So I was probably before the due date. So
Yeah.
I was always curious. I was looking up online and I couldn't really figure out an answer. But if you guys have noticed the same thing, that's why.
Yeah. When it comes to nutrient labels, so vitamin D and potassium are now required on the labels. So vitamin D, we talked about it so much during COVID, how it helps prevent lung injury. It helps you recovering with COVID. Actually, if you're on low on vitamin D, it prevents your bones from properly, mechanism of action of however vitamin D works on the bones. I'm blanking out. And also, if you have low vitamin D, it prevents, increases insulin resistance. So you're more susceptible to that. Potassium is another one that was added. They found that a lot of our population is nutrient deficit in potassium, and that's a huge thing when it comes to blood pressure.
And it's also a huge thing when it comes to people with renal problems.
Yes.
And as you've seen, there seems to be an uptick and a growth in the dialysis clinics, like was it Delvita or whatever that
Davita, yeah.
the dialysis. Those are popping up around everywhere. Same with the other brands, and this makes sense because a lot of these foods that are labeled as low sodium, they have the added saltiness taste by adding potassium. Like those salt alternatives, they're usually potassium based. So that's actually really important too. And because I'm sure they look at the stats with the potassium, I'm sure they look at the stats and they see a growing elderly population. And we know that the older you get, the more likely you are to develop some kind of renal issues. So I'm sure that's another reason why they put the potassium on, so people are more conscious, because you can actually die from consuming too much potassium, especially if you have either heart problems or kidney problems.
Yeah, and you should be aware of your daily value, which is great that they included that. Vitamin A and vitamin C is no longer mandatory. It's very voluntary for manufacturing companies, and that being it's a deficit that was in the 1990s that now is being replaced. So we fortified our cereals and everything with all these minerals, vitamins, which remove the need for that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And if I'm like a manufacturer of like a food, to be honest, I would list more than these guidelines. If my product has vitamin C and vitamin A, even though it's not required to be listed on there, I would list it on there, because that's just showing that my product has more of these vitamins.
Yeah.
And plus, if they're already have it standardized a few years ago, they already have vitamin A and C, they might leave those on there and just add the vitamin D and potassium.
What's interesting is so many processed foods don't have vitamin C in it, and it's usually a big fat zero. So probably that's a good idea for them to remove it as well. On the contrary, to show their product is healthier than it really is.
Yeah, that's a good perspective too, 100%. Because a lot of times when you see a big 0%, you're just like, oh, this probably isn't the healthiest thing. Compared to something that says 10%, you're probably more prone to taking a 10%.
Yeah,
And like you said, vitamin C is not something that's available in everything. A lot of things don't get fortified with vitamin C.
And especially the way I've been taught about vitamin C is you can dose so much higher. So, don't consult your primary care provider when you're listening to this. But I used to mega dose of vitamin C. I used to buy like that. Remember ultrasonic jewelry cleaner?
The liposomal?
Yeah, liposomal. And I made liposomal vitamin C with soy lecithin, and I used to just take shots of this stuff. I tried it on my family. I'm an experimenter. Supposedly, when they had the flu, I think the symptoms decreased quicker. But in general, what was good about the vitamin C is you were able to mega dose without it causing diarrhea or stomach issues, because it was laced in the soy.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer in vitamin C. I think it should have stayed on there. When it comes to the daily values, so that's going to change a little bit. The bottom of your nutrition label, they kind of switched to lingo a little bit, so it helps the regular Joe understand that everything when it comes to daily value percentage is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. But now you have to be careful, because if you always relied on percentages, if you were very health conscious, that's going to change on certain aspects. So you should check the FDA or check our show notes to click the links to see what was changed. And a great example is they changed the requirements from fat. It went from 65 grams to 78 grams. So now if you read something that had 30 grams of fat, it was previously 55% of the daily value, and now it's 46% of the daily value. So if you're somebody that's eating a specific amount of carbs versus fats, just be conscious about that when it comes to the percentages. Same thing with sodium. They decreased sodium from 2,400 milligrams to 2,300 milligrams. So now that's going to change from 44% to 46% of your daily value.
You know what I like too, that they required to have added sugars
Yes.
in grams. That's probably like a big one because you'd be surprised how many products have added sugars that you don't even know about that weren't as clearly labeled before. And those add into your calories. If you're trying to figure out why is this thing so calorie dense, where are these calories coming from, they're probably coming from the added sugars. And especially if you have a lot of added sugars, it's going to be really hard for you to hit all those daily values, the targets, within that 2,000 daily calorie intake.
Yep.
Because added sugars don't provide any kind of nutritional value. They just
Yeah.
add calories that you have to burn. And, hopefully people are more conscious about it. Like you said, there's a giant increase in diabetes. Maybe people are going to be more mindful, and this could be like a preventative kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's also you become very conscious where you're consuming Oberweis vanilla ice cream, and it says it used to say 18 grams of total sugar or 18 grams of sugar. Now it says there's 5 grams of sugar and 18 blanking out here 13 grams of total added sugar there. So now you know, oh wow, so this ice cream naturally for milk or sugar, whatever it's vanilla, they're adding a lot of natural sugar. Now it helps people to think, geez, I'm really eating a lot of processed foods.
Right. Because a lot of times you would think vanilla, it's probably the most basic choice, probably the healthiest, you could say, ice cream, but it's not. It's probably just as bad as you as a chocolate or strawberry or whatever flavor it is.
I think this is perfect to combat those drinks that says like juice concentrate, or you think it's like natural sugars from these fruits, and that's what you're imagining, but these guys just trick you. Now, if you look at the total sugars, you could differentiate the truth from the lie. Another interesting thing is, just like I mentioned, the total fats. So they removed that, and they still stayed with a total fat, trans fat labeling. One thing I was reading in a book is when you look at most products, it always says 0 trans fats, like a slice of pizza. But if you're eating 2 slices, actually the trans fats start adding up.
So you have like 0.5, because if it's below a certain number, they have to add it, right?
Exactly. And you only can consume 20 grams of what is it called, of saturated fats. So it all adds up with whatever you're eating, especially pizza, which is one example.
Yeah, you just have to be really mindful of like what you eat. Obviously, this isn't like you could say the perfect nutrition label. I'm sure we could definitely come up with a better one with better requirements, but I like the way they're pushing this one. I think it's a little better than the one that we had before.
Yeah, usually we talk shit about the FDA sometimes, being lazy sometimes. I like what they did here.
They're trying here at least.
They're trying. One thing when it comes to serving sizes, just like you mentioned, so they went from half a cup to 2/3. So now you're going to see 270 calories instead of 200 calories on your nutritional label when it comes to a serving. Same thing for soft drinks. So 12 ounces and 20 ounces, it's all labeled one serving. So you're going to have 120 calories or 200 calories. And this is because evidence is showing that people are more likely to consume the whole product. Therefore, we should properly switch the label to one serving size, as they should have.
Yeah, instead of trying to be all sneaky and say, hey, let's make it seem like this whole bottle is actually the thing, but it's actually 2/3. That's like the one thing that always blew my mind about this is like these like ridiculous serving sizes, and this was almost on everything, like sweets, drinks, just foods. It's mind blowing. Like same with the serving sizes in McDonald's. I was watching a YouTube video a couple of days ago how over time the serving sizes have gotten bigger and bigger. Like a normal drink at McDonald's used to be 6 ounces, 8 ounces, and 12. Now it starts at I think like 8 or 12, and it goes up to like 16 and like 24. So it's crazy how over time as humans we've been fed more and we are accustomed to bigger and bigger portion sizes.
Right. And what also blows my mind with inflation and everything happening, just like you mentioned, serving sizes are getting smaller, but when it comes to these sugary drinks, they're still the same. You can still buy 1 liter of soda for like $1.
Yeah, 2
10
liters.
for 10 or whatever. 2 liters, for 10 for 10.
Yeah, cheaper than
why
water.
Why doesn't that get cheaper?
Yeah, it's
or more
crazy.
expensive, I should say.
Like it's crazy. Like when you go to a gas station, sometimes water costs more than a drink, and it blows my mind. Like how does something with more ingredients comes out to be cheaper than something with less ingredients or with one ingredient? Another cool thing that I found out, how back in the day people used to ask like at McDonald's if you want to supersize it.
Yeah.
So they stopped doing that, and the reason why they did that is because they found out that people wanted to always get the best deal. So that is why on like the McDonald's menu, you have like just a sandwich and then you have like a meal. And they show you different price differences. And usually like the meal is like maybe a few dollars more than the actual sandwich. and that programs your brain to already see a better deal and be more inclined to take that deal. So you're naturally already programmed to take the bigger portion of
Yeah.
it. And with the whole supersize me thing, they stopped it because McDonald's found out that, hey, if you ask people to supersize it, they're going to be more inclined to do it. So essentially, somebody would come in for a sandwich, but they'll walk out with a bigger meal with the sandwich, the fries, and a bigger drink. But they initially wanted to just buy that sandwich just because you asked them to.
Yeah, it's like that marketing technique where you go to buy your iPhone to T-Mobile and you somehow walk out with a screen protector, a phone cover, and probably something else. You know, they just got you somehow.
And even marketing is going so deep for these fast food places where they have, you know, how some places offer you to order in a kiosk. So if you're a person that comes in there frequently, they're able to figure out, like through your phone or through something, through Bluetooth or through Wi-Fi or something like that, what you buy, what you prefer. And what they do in this kiosk is they show you something geared towards you, so you're more inclined to purchase something if you're on the fence. And that's mind blowing, man.
When I was younger, I used to work at TJ Maxx, and those kiosks, those front register displays, those were the sellers. Because you're standing in line, you're bored, you keep looking at that item, and it just starts growing on you. Eventually, you pick it up and you buy it. So things are purposely marketed in the store just to bring in sales.
Isn't that crazy?
Yep.
And imagine, like, if you're more prone to buying, let's say, like Kit Kats, somehow the kiosk knows like Kit Kats, so if it's automated, it throws you Kit Kats like there, just because it knows, hey, Matt's here, he likes Kit Kats, and trying to make him spend more money, let's push some Kit Kats around. Imagine if like marketing goes to that extent, where like, you know how there's supposed to be those Amazon shops. Imagine if they have almost like a walk into Amazon and on your phone, it already tells you deals that you would like.
Right. I mean, this is already advanced in the social media aspect when it comes to the algorithms, from
100%.
that Netflix documentary to Social Dilemma.
Yeah, because if you ever bought something online through Facebook or Instagram, that's always stored. And technically, Instagram could sell this information. If you're someone that's prone to buying, let's say, like graphic tees, technically Instagram and Facebook could send your information to these graphic tee manufacturers, and they know, hey, you're going to be a good target for their ads.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how everything is like that, and you don't even know. And it's basically almost like tricking you into buying stuff because it knows what you like and it knows what you're more prone to doing if you're on the fence.
Yeah, literally society has been preying on the human psyche for everything. But to wrap up this nutritional value topic here, one thing that stood out for me is, for example, dietary fiber got increased from 25 grams to 28. So still, everyone keep in mind that fiber is very, very important. Just like on that episode, we talked about the colon cancer risks. Now they're doing screenings at age 45 instead of 50 for men. Make sure you're getting in the dietary fiber.
When you look at like the nutrition label, do you consider fiber as a carb?
It's not. So
In your opinion?
It's not, because I actually talked to somebody that was doing keto and everything. So let's just say you're eating a celery stick and you have 10 grams of carbs, but 5 grams is dietary fiber. That fiber is not ingested into the bloodstream. It's just used as bulk in the gut. So you're technically only adding 5 extra carbs into your diet.
Yeah, a lot of nutritionists, I ask some people this question like a lot, and it's always like 50-50 for me that they tell me. And some nutritionists say, yeah, it's still included because you're still getting some nutritional benefit from that fiber, just not as much as an actual carb. And as other people tell me, don't worry about it. Like personally, I'll be honest, if I'm like meeting my carb intake and I'm trying to cheat a little bit and I'm like a little bit over it, I'll take out those fiber grams of carb just so I could fit in it. So I'm kind of going on both ways. But on a personal level, to be honest, I try to include fiber in my like net carb intake, just because that way technically I'll be eating less carbs than if I don't include it.
Yeah, I wish I was tracking fiber just to find out what I'm actually consuming, but most of my kitchen is whole food, so I'm sure I'm getting most of it.
Yeah.
When it comes to like carbohydrates, just like you mentioned, they actually decreased it from 300 grams to 275. Protein stayed the same, still important at 50. Honestly, I think you should be eating over at least a gram per body part, at least half of that. 50 grams of fibers. Not a lot. At least that's just my personal opinion, but that's the FDA
You
there.
mean protein?
That's what I meant to say. Protein. Geez, 50
Yeah,
grams would turn
that's a
into a
lot.
shitstorm really quick.
Yeah, dude, 50 grams is not a lot of protein, especially if you're someone that's working out and trying to, build muscle and stuff. Like, it's not a lot, 50
And
grams.
that's the most important building block. So that should be
Yeah.
emphasized a lot more.
Yeah, I wonder if it has to do as well with something with the aging population, because because people that have renal problems, they can't have too much protein either, 100%. If I'm recalling correctly from my
You are and phosphorus.
yeah, from my back in my days where I used to work with like kidney transplants and stuff. They have to be careful with that, and that might be why. But for general public, you should, like Matt said, at least 1 gram per pound of weight.
I mean, when I eat my grass-fed steak, it's honestly up to 35 grams of protein. That's just one meal.
True, and it depends on what your goals are, right? If you're trying to, build muscle, you want to eat more protein. But if you're trying to, let's say, cut down and get skinnier, you could still overeat protein, because you're going to be focusing on calories, and with each piece of meat you eat, that's still going to be calories. Just because, let's say, you ate like 25 grams of carbs, and then you ate like 200 grams of protein or whatever, and you're like a small person, and your whole diet ends up being 4,000 calories, and normally you burn 2,000. Well, guess what? You're still putting on a weight. You're not going to lose that weight. So that's kind of, you have to personalize your diet and your macros based on your goals, because this isn't a one size fits all. This is your like minimums you should be hitting.
Yeah, and this is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. If you put in your numbers based on height and weight and you burn 25 calories a day, you got to balance out those numbers. And that's why this is just a golden standard for the average Joe. We believe in precision nutrition, so base your nutrition on how you are as a person.
That's a lot of carbs. 275. That's quite a bit of carbs, man.
I don't eat that much.
Yeah, I definitely don't eat that much either. I mean, depends on the day, because if you smash Domino's pizza or something,
Who's counting those?
I'm gonna hit that. But on a daily average, I don't eat 275 grams of carbs. I probably am close with that, and probably protein, if anything. But carbs, it's a lot of carbs.
That is a lot.
Yeah.
So let's go into nurses losing their license. And you might be wondering how that happens. So first we'll start off with the story. And this is Radonda. She's a former Vanderbilt nurse that was actually criminally indicted for accidentally killing a patient with a medication error back in 2017. This was a nurse in Tennessee. She was actually stripped of her nursing license from the Board of Tennessee this year in July.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if I'm correct, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is she basically went into her Pyxis and overrid a medication, and she was going to take one medication, and she ended up taking a paralytic.
Yeah, she searched VE.
So she was to get Versed, but she ended up getting another paralytic.
Zirconium, yeah.
So you have to be careful. Yeah, we could override the Pyxis and things like that. And ICU nurses, I think that's a really good thing to have. I know some ICUs and some Pyxis, they don't let you override. But in ICU, I feel like you should have the knowledge to be able to override, because sometimes doors don't want to open up, or you're in a hurry, or the medication is filled in there, but in the system it's popping up as it's not, and you need to override it. Yeah. But when you do override, you're taking that responsibility of bypassing that checks and balances system. So you're basically skipping over a protocol, and the responsibility is basically in your hands. You can't then blame the machine for messing you up, because you're bypassing the process.
Yeah, it looks so bad when you look at from a public standpoint, because she overrode all these protocols from the Pyxis, the hospital, and she killed this patient. But in reality, just like you mentioned, the ICU, you got an emergent situation, the crash cart's running out of medications, there's a charge nurse or whoever that's sending you out to go run and get something from the Pyxis. Do you remember that one time in the hospital? It was me, you, and another traveler. We couldn't find that freaking med, how to override it. Same situation. You kept going back and forth. Another traveler was trying to help you. It's so easy just to pull the wrong thing and give it. Yeah. But also, how much, like if I'm pulling Versed, I'm always looking at that vial and making sure it is before I walk away. So, unfortunately, in her case, she was just probably stressed out, was running around. I mean, she was still pulling it. There's so much ways to prevent this from happening.
You gotta be a little mindful, yeah. But we're not sure. I didn't look into her background, how experienced she was, because she couldn't have that much ICU experience if she made a mistake like that. And to tell you guys, so the ideal process to avoid the situation, this is how it should ideally go, but it doesn't always go like this. So you have an emergency situation. Okay, great. People come in the room. You have a physician or an NP or a PA, So patient's crashing, you got the crash cart in there, you slap the pads on them, you're assess the situation. Maybe they're not coding yet, but they're about to do a procedure. The ideal process is the physician puts in the orders, or the nurse puts in the orders for the physician after verbal consent or a phone call, and then you go to the Pyxis, you type in a medication, you type in a patient's name, search the medication, it dispenses it for you, and you move along the way. But that doesn't always happen, and it's rushed. A lot of times it's, hey, get the medication now, and we'll worry about the orders later, because we have to save this patient's life and assess the situation and figure it out, because I'm not going to put in orders right now when the patient's crashing. So someone's going to have to go rush and get the meds, and this situation can happen multiple times. But like I said before, if you're going to bypass these safety measures, you're taking this responsibility into your own hands, and you can't blame anybody else.
Right, because she was kind of acting out of, oh, the system got me, it's checking for me. But here it wasn't, and you still failed to check. Yeah. One thing you mentioned is you're wondering how much years of experience she has. So I'm not sure how much years she has, but sometimes the longer you're in the hospital and more experience, sometimes you are less prone to checking all the safety checks because you think you know it all too. Yeah. So that's another dangerous side of nursing too, is having too little experience. And then the other spectrum is that being that cocky nurse, the know-it-all CVICU nurse. Let me throw that at one in there. JK. And she just she just overrides, doesn't check, and shit happens.
Or maybe the medication was in the wrong spot. That could have been it. But I feel like that would have been addressed in there. Because sometimes pharmacy stocks, and they make mistakes too. But still, like, when you're drawing it up, aren't you look at the medication, because you have to look at the syringe, because you gotta get the proper amount of mLs in that syringe, right? And then when you're pushing the medication, aren't you also saying, hey, Versed going in, right? So did she just look at it, maybe was scared to ask, hey, is this Versed? Is this what you wanted? And she just pulled it anyways?
Right. Who knows what kind of team she had doing this. But at the end of the day, it's her fault, and she's getting charged with reckless homicide. Yeah. That sounds wild. Like, you're a nurse. She even referenced here that she's like, I wanted to become a nurse so I could take care of people the way I took care of my grandmother or nurses did. And unfortunate story, you killed somebody, and it's so unfortunate, man. So we don't wish that on any nurse.
Yeah, maybe she shouldn't go to prison or get charged on a not sure what the word is, but on a legal aspect. But maybe just take away her license and have her not practice anymore. But I don't think she has to face criminal charges for this. This seems like an honest mistake, and it sucks because someone died.
Pete's an honest mistake, but somebody died.
But somebody died. So that's the thing. But we're all humans, and same way you could die crossing the street, you could die from this kind of mistake. And
that's why
it's our job to not do these mistakes, though. That's the thing.
And it's also BS because we have so much damn pressure on us when it comes to the physicians, patients. We always mention that, and things like this where you are forced to override meds and break protocol and put your license at risk because of a patient in an emergency, and then you end up making an error and you get effed for it. It sucks. We need a little revolution in the healthcare system and make better standards for nurses, because look how much we're putting ourselves as the frontline heroes.
Yeah. But one thing I learned is with standards, no matter how much standards you implement, oral processes you create, mistakes are always going to happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like as a profession, as a whole, we do a really good job of preventing errors. I feel that since I started to be a nurse, and now I've been a nurse for over 4 years now, I feel like the protocols that they have implemented have definitely made nursing a little bit more safe. And there's definitely going to be more to come. There's been the arguments or the propositions of making certain nursing roles automated. Imagine if there was some system where it dispenses you all the medication that you would need to deliver for that shift. That'll be a lot easier. Of course, this is a different situation, but I'm just gonna give a different example. You already come into work and on your shift, and you have the due medications already laid out for you. That'll be super nice, and all you have to do is get the PRNs if needed. Yeah. That could eliminate a lot of stuff too. Because, I'll be honest. There's been times where I couldn't find Colace, and I messaged pharmacy, and they're supposed to send me down to Colace, and it's been 4 hours, and the Colace still isn't here. Well, I'm sorry, patient didn't get the Colace. Because it's already 5 hours late. I'm not gonna give them a Colace now, and another one 2 hours later.
Reschedule, not given. Patient refused.
Yeah, I say patient refused. Family refused.
Family refused. I'm not saying anything, but those are options.
Yeah.
So reasons to lose your license.
Yeah. Patient stated he's been having diarrhea. Refused.
5 stools this shift. Hold. So reason for nurses to lose their license, there's different things like DUIs and drugs and all that. So we're going to go into the reasons. But every single year, there's an average of 7,000 nurses that the board revokes licenses or does some kind of discipline based on what the nurse does. And there's 1 in 4 things that could happen. So the nurse could get a reprimanded. Geez, I'm pronouncing
reprimanded?
that. You could get reprimanded, he or she. So you just get a slap on the wrist there. You could have your nurse's license on a probation. That's going to depend on the board and per state. You could have a suspended license where you're removed for quite some time from your profession, or you could have your license revoked.
The scary one.
Yeah, the scary one. So let's go dive into some things of why nurses lose their license. So the first one, funny that we're going to mention that at first, but failure to pay their child support. This is for all the dudes and bros out there in nursing.
Yeah, women pay child support too, dude.
They do.
And majority are females, so there's some females out there that aren't paying child support that are getting their license revoked.
Yeah, could be.
Because some nurses make a lot of money, dude. And low key, if I was a poor man and the divorced wife had more money than me and I'm taking care of the kid, yeah, I'm pushing for some of that, that like, sugar mama money, you know what I'm saying? Just to get by, So be careful, nurses out there, You safety, if anything.
I agree with you. It happens to both. One of our friends, it's more of an acquaintance, but like the girl left them with 2 kids.
Yeah.
Damn, she's a baby mama, but she dipped.
Yeah, it's
a baby daddy.
Like when you think of child support, the first thing that always comes to mind is the dude not paying for the child.
Isn't
right?
that messed up? That's in her psyche.
Yeah. Yeah. Deep. And even in like, when I was younger or whatever, every so often I used to watch like Judge Judy or whatever, those Judge Joe Brown
Cheaters.
shows. Yeah. And then like in one of the episodes, I think it was Judge Judy or something, where it was the same case, someone not paying child support, but the issue was that the dude was taking care of the kid and the woman was getting child support. So it was like a 50-50 kind of thing, but the guy was doing more of the work and the baby mama was just, complaining that she wasn't getting paid, and it comes to be that the woman barely did anything for the kid and she wanted money just for herself. So you have to realize that you can't just automatically assume things just because of past situations. And it's kind of crazy how we're programmed to do that, because there's definitely fathers out there with kids that are doing a lot better than the woman would have with that same kid.
Yeah,
right.
Very
and
good
the
perspective.
and the father figure plays a big role in family dynamics and growing up. Of course, so does the mom as well.
You need both the masculine and feminine. If one lacks, there's different traits that pop up in the child's life.
But pay child support.
Yeah, pay it. And this is in all 50 states. You could get your license suspended or revoked. And this is any kind of license. It's not even nursing. It's any kind of professional licensure, occupational jobs that you have a license in.
What about driver's license?
What about it?
You get
I don't think
too?
You can't get a suspended for not paying child support.
That'd be some
Imagine,
shit.
hey, see, that's a little bit of a tyranny there from the government. Hey, if you're going to work and you're not paying child support, okay, you're not going to drive. Now you're not going to eat.
You're gonna go to work.
You're not going to go to work, and you can't drive. Jeez, God forbid, man. It's already getting bad. Let's not even stir the pot there.
Yeah, but you still got to pay your child support to get your license back.
You do. The second one is a patient in abusing a patient or neglecting them, and that usually happens with the elderly. And it's interesting because up until the 1970s, this is when they first started discussing elderly abuse. Before, it was more of a private thing. It wasn't really considered a social crisis or like a health concern.
Yeah, when you mentioned patient abuse and neglect, it's kind of sad that the first thing the first scenario that came to my mind was that nursing home patient that's been there for a long time and basically being neglected. And that just shows you how we're almost programmed to think about certain situations, scenarios in a certain way based on the stuff that we see on news. Because I've personally never experienced a situation where I firsthand saw neglect or abuse to a patient nursing home, but we always see them on the news and the cases.
The whole New York thing, remember?
The whole New York thing too. And then even like ads when we were growing up, when we used to watch TV, there was always the ad, hey, is your loved one in a nursing home, this and this, we are the lawyers for you, stuff like that. And you associate these things and they get programmed, which is sad because then people are afraid to put their loved ones in nursing homes that need that kind of care, because the neglect does happen at home either, because sometimes the family can't take care of this patient, but they're scared to send them to nursing home because they think they're going to get treated even worse. And because there's been a handful of times where like I dealt with a patient from home care that the family was taking care of, and they were in a horrible situation. And we were trying to figure out why, and there was the fear of them going to a nursing home, but the family could not manage to do all this care, and the patient was suffering.
Yeah.
And they would have had a lot better experience and a lot better time from the patient and the family if they would have just given this patient a slot in a nursing home. Yeah.
100%. I've never experienced any neglect or abuse myself either, but I've always heard stories. And honestly, any single hospital we travel to, there's always those specific nursing homes. They're like, yeah, the patient's from there, right?
Yeah, there you know.
They already know. And
Sad.
It's sad. And same thing when I worked in like Chicago. There's a nursing home that we knew these patients are just out there, or the psych nursing homes where, like, they're probably doing some sexual thing, or there's literally patients that are leaving the nursing home to go buy cigarettes from the gas station or alcohol across. Like, there's just some wild stories you hear that's like, how is this happening in America?
Or even patients tell you if they're like going to like a rehab center for, let's say they're post hip and something, and they can't go home because no one could drive into rehab, so they have to stay at like a subacute rehab center. Even like those stories that you hear the patient tell you, they're like, oh, I don't want to go here because I know somebody that's been there and they said it's bad, and I don't want to go here because I've heard these kind of stories. So it's crazy to have to be in that position as a patient and already hear these negative things about these places.
Very good point, man. How many
Right?
times they're like, yeah, let me talk to social work because I refuse to go here. They
Right.
treat me bad.
Yeah, and it's like, sorry, there's no place that you could go to because this is the only place that your insurance covers.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, that has
Especially
no
with the
choice.
trach patients.
Yeah, and those frequent flyers from different nursing homes, they tell you like the things that goes on. But the thing is, you can't always believe them, because I've met some patient that came to our subacute facility that I used to work at, and they'll be all cool and nice, but the thing is they're really needy. Like they're there for like a hip and don't want to do the rehab, and they don't want to do these things themselves, but then when they go to the hospital or the family comes in, they start talking shit about the staff. And it's like, we can't help you if you can't help yourself, because we just can't. We can't afford to do certain things. So it's like, you can't always take everything as fact just because someone's telling you, because you have to take both perspectives. And as nurses in a hospital, we don't have both perspectives. We just have the perspective of the patient.
Yes, we do.
And the third one is going to be sexual misconduct, and that is both through professional, like a nurse and a physician, to a patient, and like a nurse to nurse or a nurse to physician. And I've never experienced it myself. I mean, there's been times where like little grandmas have like hit on me and stuff, but I wouldn't call that sexual misconduct or anything like that. It's just like whatever, grandma's trying to be funny, let her live a little bit. And I never seen anything between a physician and a nurse. Like there is some shit that goes at a hospital that you hear about, like, people having sex at work and all that shit. But I've never, dealt with anybody that has been sexually mistreated by a coworker or a staff or a superior, you could say.
Yeah, I've heard the hooking up part, but it's never reported to sexual misconduct where the other party feels like something happened and they both get effed and dinged and maybe get their license revoked, because that's a huge thing. It results in disciplinary action right away, and we always do our continuing education about sexual misconduct every single year and every single contract.
Right. But you could definitely think about it happening, right? You could kind of, you're not blind to the fact that it does happen. And we're in a field where we work with predominantly females, and a lot of the physicians are doctors. It's a little bit more 50-50 with the physician side, but majority of nurses are female, right? So I understand sometimes guys have tendencies to hit on nurses, and some people might, feel like they're experiencing some sexual misconduct, and it does happen. It's just, one of those situations where if you have dudes and chicks, it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
right?
and we're guys, so maybe we can't comment as much on sexual misconduct, or we haven't had situations where we felt that. Maybe if you're a female nurse, yes, I'm sure there's a patient that told you something that's wrong and you felt disgusted and excuse me, I'm sorry that happened. But honestly, in my standpoint, I never had anything like that where I felt like self-conscious about my body.
Okay, yeah, personally not, but I remember some nurses on the unit. There was a few patients that would give them a hard time and just say these inappropriate remarks, but never got escalated. What basically happens then is usually it's me or some other dude just takes the care of that patient. Maybe not the full care, but we'll go in there more often than a nurse. You know what I'm saying? Just to show that hey, you shouldn't be doing those kind of things, and just so they don't do it because they're not gonna do it to a guy. So you're kind of creating that like border. And sometimes, if I overhear it and a nurse is uncomfortable, sometimes I go into the room and be like, hey, you probably shouldn't be saying that. You're gonna make people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So you have to catch him on that, because if you keep allowing this patient to keep saying these remarks over and over again, and then nobody tell him, hey, stop, nobody tell him to not do it, he's gonna keep doing it.
Yep. Set some boundaries, guys. The fourth one for reasons why nurses lose their license is drug-related violations. And there was a little study that said it was an estimated of 10% of nurses will misuse drugs or alcohol sometimes in their careers. That goes with anything, prescription pills or such. It's so prevalent in our nursing careers. We could easily scan something and not give it or forget it. It could be stealing things. During the pandemic, we've heard so many stories where fentanyl became an issue and other drugs where pharmacy had to switch protocols because people were stealing them.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a handful of times where I actually, kept some leftover fentanyl in my pocket and came home and I'm just like, oh shit, there's fentanyl in my pocket. But I would return it to work. I tell my manager, because those are important drugs, and every time you pull it, the system knows who pulled it. So if you're one of those nurses that likes to steal drugs from work, technically we have you tracked.
Yeah, I mean, that's different because then you'd be diverting drugs for personal use or for sale use.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, we definitely heard about it. Even one of the facilities that we worked at, they had to change up the protocol for pulling certain medications because a dude was taking medication and literally injecting himself into it while he was at work. And that's insane. That's mind blowing. Like he was doing it at work.
Yeah, we've had a crazy case back in my previous staff job where there was a day shift nurse that they kept noticing he's funny and something's going on. And one time,
Like acting funny?
Yeah, just very awkward guy. And one time a nurse saw him with like a little insulin syringe in the arm like that. I don't know how dramatic it was brought up or how it actually happened, but the charge nurse made him like take a drug test right away. I'm not sure what happened, but the guy wasn't around anymore.
Yeah.
So who knows what happened? Actually, no. The test came back negative, and then he said some kind of sexual comment to a pharmacist, and then he got dinged for it. That's right.
That's some shit.
That's some shit. Yeah, he was a character though.
Yeah, but nursing, like as nurses, the hospital facilities, we're supposed to be reliable, right? And technically, we do have open access to basically almost any drug in a Pyxis. You can override almost every drug in the Pyxis. So there's definitely ways a drug user could definitely bypass the system and take these drugs with them home or use them, because the system trusts us that we pull the medication, we scan it, and we administer it into the patient. That's basically the administration process. It's just based on us being honest.
Yeah,
because there's no system. It's not like you give somebody morphine, and I don't think there's a test next to the patient that tests for morphine, right?
Yeah,
and you don't know.
And that goes perfectly into point number 5, which is falsifying documentation. If you get caught up like that, that's going to be an issue. What you mentioned, there's no way to track it, but falsifying documents could be as easy as the patient had a rough night, so I gave him a little bit of push of morphine, and then you forgot to document it. And then a day went back, and then something happened where they uncovered, hey, why did this patient, do something, or respirations went down? More of like maybe the blood pressure was low, you didn't catch it, and then we had to do a bolus. Why? And then they find out you gave morphine. That could become an issue. There's going to be some disciplinary action.
Right. Imagine if you gave it before change of shift and you never documented it. And now the patient's a little labile. Maybe you gave him, maybe the order said to start at 1 milligram. And since the patient was in severe pain, you just had to give him 2 or 3 or 4 instead of that 1 to test it out. And you leave and don't document it. And then for some reason that patient goes to respiratory arrest. Like, that's on you. Like, it's scary. That's one way you could lose your license.
And it could be so easy. And it could be falsifying documents. Could be just writing maybe a nursing note or progress note that doesn't just go along with what you charted. So just be careful. Now, a few podcast episodes, we mentioned that the progress notes could be used and held against in court of law.
Right. That's why I always, if I give a medication, I forget to chart it off, and I remember on my drive home, I always call. I'm always like, hey, I gave this patient this, zero point 0.5 milligrams of Xanax. Sorry, I forgot to scan document it just because they were so anxious. But you have to call, because imagine if you gave that zero point 0.5, you don't chart it, and it's Q like 6 or Q4, and the patient is like still a little bit anxious, but breathing isn't the best, and you gave him another zero point 0.5, and that just pushes them over that limit. It's because you don't know how they're gonna react. It might be such a small dose, but everybody reacts differently. Everybody reacts differently, and it's crazy to think about how 1 milligram of morphine can drop somebody's blood pressure within seconds, and it takes 4 milligrams of morphine to cure this guy's pain. Like, that's how big of a difference it is. And it doesn't even, people say, yeah, it depends on the body size. It's not even body size. It's just the way people react to medications.
100%.
Same with like alcohol. Like, yeah, for some reason we have friends that are bigger than us that can't tolerate as much alcohol as us. Same way we have people that are smaller than us that can tolerate more than us. We just don't know. You can't always base on body size and assumptions.
Yeah, and the second one, where it comes to falsifying documentation, this is a little bit out there. But if you already have your nursing license suspended and you go to a different employer, you provide them a different nursing license thinking it won't matter, and you get caught up like that, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And number 6 is probably a really big deal as well, and that is a breach in patient confidentiality. That is where HIPAA comes after you. That's where you spoke about a patient outside of work or something, or released some documents, maybe took a photo of a patient's MRN number, and they got it released through social media, like that. All that HIPAA stuff, you could definitely use your license for that. And the HIPAA thing is it's very scary, because it's something as simple or so little as talking about a patient on the elevator where somebody overhears and it gets passed on. Like, HIPAA is very, very easy to piss off.
Yeah, and you hear so many nurses that got fired before for doing silly mistakes, or a celebrity came, or somebody that's popular and they talked about it, bam, you get dinged.
Right, like even at Pryor Hospital when we had Juice WRLD come in, I think a few nurses got fired for that, because they were talking to their colleagues and their friends about it, and that, I mean, what can you do about it? Yeah.
What can you do? So if you're a nurse that experienced something like this and things ended up bad and you're on probation, every single state is going to have different measures to get off probation, or what you have to do. So this is an example from Indiana. If you're on probation, in order to get off probation, you have to petition to the Board of Nursing, and you're actually going to have to attend a hearing where the nurse is going to swear under oath and is going to have to testify in a court. You have to do a opening statement. You have to call the witnesses, introduce your evidence, do a cross-examination. Basically, you have to be in court and have an attorney. And after that, after you comply with everything, it's going to be up to the board to decide what's going to happen, or when we could revoke the probation. I'm not sure other states are working. This is muddy water to figure out what exactly happens during probation.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of this stuff is basically at the board's discretion. Even when they revoke your license with revocation, there's a few routes this could go. It could go one route where your license is revoked for a few years. It could go where your license is revoked forever. It could go your license is revoked for a few years and they make you take the NCLEX. There's different avenues, and it seems like with all of these things, you're penalized not necessarily based on guidelines, but based on the board's discretion. Yeah. So it's more like a subjective kind of thing, where depending on what you did and how the board feels, that's what you get hit with.
That's tough, man. You have a bunch of judges that listen to your case and decide how bad you messed up and if you deserve to work as a nurse again.
Yeah, it sucks, man. I hope I'm never in a situation. I don't see myself being in a situation. It's not about being tripped up, because like I feel like when you say tripped up, it's like, don't get caught. But it's not about not getting caught. It's about doing the right thing
all the time.
And it's about like being honest with things, and just if you do get caught up doing something that maybe you did by accident. If it was me, I would use everything in my willpower to make it known that it was an accident and then it wasn't intended.
Yeah, just
that intent's going to be key.
Just like you mentioned, if you took the med by accident or you missed something, you call. and you kind of cover your ass. If you go that extra mile to help prevent that error that already happened or bring it up, and just like you say, honesty, things could play out a lot different than, for example, that one. We were on a podcast. We're talking about that nurse in Georgia that lied about her original statement that she helped the patient, that she was initiating CPR, but then when the recording was there, she didn't do any of that. So honesty is the best policy, and I don't think a lot of people are going to get into the situations where this gets involved to the board. Maybe your hospital management is going to get involved if something small happened, like a med error, where you have to kind of talk about it with management to help troubleshoot how to prevent these mistakes. But to get to that point, it's not unlikely unless you're a bad nurse.
Yeah, always remember, it's your life, it's your license.
Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We talked about the new guidelines for the FDA. Stay on top of your nutrition, and of course, reasons why you might be losing your license, including that one sad case with the nurse in Tennessee. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. If you find value in it, please give us a ranking, a 5-star. We appreciate that. Share with your loved ones. We'll be back again.
Thanks so much.
Peace.
Bye-bye.